Welcome, EasyMed Nation, for this second part of the podcast with Erik Vollebregt. So I hope you enjoyed the first part. If you didn't, so you can go on the podcast website, so podcast.easymedicaldevice.com to see the previous episode. And we'll continue now with the talk with Erik. So I still hope that you have subscribed to the podcast or subscribed to the channel, the YouTube channel. And that you provide also some review. It will be really helpful for me. It takes a few seconds for you, so really thank you for that. Okay, let's jump to the second part, which is really also a great one. But in terms of that, so as we said, we have now more regulation. So before we had the MDD, now the MDR, which is increasing, if I can say. Mm-hmm. What do you think about the consequences for big companies and small companies?
Big companies and small companies. Well, what I typically see is that I would say within big companies you have two groups. There's the companies that that have basically said, okay, we are going to, as this guy says in this excellent science fiction movie, The Martian, we are going to science the shit out of this. So, like for example, Alcon is a good example of it. They were very public about it. They said, "Okay, we want to be ready before everybody else."
Okay.
And there's companies that see this among the big companies as a potentially competitive advantage. Whereas there's also companies that say, well, I just see this as a unnecessary cost exercise. It's not very clear at the moment, so I'm going to do as little as I can and delay implementation as long as possible. These are the big companies that will run into some nasty surprises.
Okay.
But that's the minority of the big companies, I would say. So you've got, then there's the small companies, and what you typically see with the small companies is that you've got, well, first there's the small companies that have no idea. Then are the small companies that have an idea but they have no resources. So They're basically sitting like, okay, there's a lot I need to do, but I just can't seem to make this happen. And then there are the small companies that totally nail it because they have a limited number of products and they are like, okay, this is sink or swim. So we are going to get this right no matter what. Now, another, let's say, complicating factor with smaller companies, I would say, is that if you have smaller companies with really innovative products, high-risk innovative products, then for them, the level of complexity and the level of remediation they need to do can be really daunting. Let's say, for example, I am a startup company with a neural implant that allows people with lock-in syndrome to communicate with the outside world, right? Totally low risk, not surgically invasive. It's like what could go wrong with an implant like that? Well, this is the kind of stuff that would be subject to a lot of additional scrutiny, which we do not know yet, because the MDCG committees that are going to look at this, I think they will be established very soon, but still not. There is no guidance on what kind of clinical evidence would we like to see for this kind of thing, although it's going to be part of the part of European scrutiny. And even though there is a possibility for a procedure under the MDR that looks a bit like the pharmaceutical scientific advice procedure, right? That allows you to go to the authorities and ask for scientific advice. Well, you first need a window that's open that you can go to and say, hello, what should I do in terms of clinical data for this particular super high risk and totally uncomplicated implant? But yeah, that's the problem with the transitional period. All of that stuff is still not in place yet. So that means that by the time that that's ready, a small company almost doesn't have any possibilities anymore. And then the problem with small companies I see is that small companies are usually treated very badly by notified bodies. They are really being pushed around. And that's something that always annoys the hell out of me. It's basically when I see clients that are really treated badly by notified bodies, it's usually small companies.
Yeah, I imagine because they have small budget, they don't pay a lot, they have less employees. Because I saw that the fees for notified bodies are made like how many employees you have, what is your kind of size and everything, which defines how much you have to pay for that. So
yeah, and I really see very nasty situations with notified bodies just saying like, no, we can't schedule your audit. We still can't schedule your audit. And then you see this company like sort of fighting with its notified body for almost a year before they finally can get an audit date scheduled. And then they have an audit date 2 weeks before their certificate expires. And then the notified body is like, hey, you have all these major non-conformities that you will never fix before your certificate expires. Oh, that's too bad. Your certificate is going to expire. And you're like, Jesus, this is really, really, yeah. I mean, if a government agency would act like that, the world would be too small.
Yeah.
If notified body is acting like that, then everybody is like, oh, well, that's just the market, And that's something I think where competent authorities could do a lot by policing their notified bodies better. I mean, I recently had a situation like that with one of these UK notified bodies that is in total disarray at the moment, and basically nobody's picking up the phone. And then the only way that you can fix a situation like that is basically approach their competent authority and say, hey, is this the level of administrative diligence that you are willing to put up with? And then fortunately, I mean, there's a lot you can say about the MHRA, but I think I think the MHRA is fantastic. I mean, they should. I mean, the UK as a country and the Brexit, I'm sort of agnostic about it, but we should really keep the MHRA. These guys, they're incredibly responsive. They have done a lot, I think, for the European devices system. It's a pity we're losing the MHRA. Yeah.
No, it's really great because a lot of the source of information I also get it from the MHRA website. They are providing a lot of information, a lot of documents, a lot of guidance. So it's really answering a lot of questions, which is maybe something that we can lose with the Brexit. But yeah, it's really a pity. So mainly regarding the small companies and big ones. We have now the situation with notified bodies where we have small and big notified bodies. I think we will lose a lot of notified bodies also because I think the requirements are increasing. So is this something that will impact us also or not?
Well, I think so because you could say there's two big developments going on that affect the notified body capacity. There's the whole MDR, IVDR designation funnel, if you will, that all these notified bodies need to go through. And I think the last figures that are currently on the table say that there's 33 notified bodies for, let me check in my secret notes.
Okay.
Yeah, 33 notified bodies that applied for MDR. So that's 33 applied. We don't know if they will all make it.
We have only one for now that made it.
Yeah, we have only one that for now made it, but that might as well be, if we have a hard Brexit, then they're gone again. So
just for people, the one that made it is BSI, and BSI is the notified body for UK, and UK is on Brexit in 2 months. So it's like, what will happen then?
Yeah, I think it's a nice publicity stunt that they managed to get BSI designated before the Brexit. But it depends on what will happen with the Brexit, whether they are of any use to the rest of the.
But I also saw BSI pushing people to move their certification from the UK notified body to the Netherlands one. So it's also kind of a message from them to be more in the safe side instead of waiting for a decision from the European Union.
And that's another interesting thing, actually, that's happening there, because and also shows that competent authorities could work together a lot better. Because if you look at the transfer process that BSI is offering its customers, I think it's really good to start with that they can offer their customers a fast transfer process. But if you look at the transfer process, it is not necessarily in conformity with the voluntary transfer process set out in the NBOC guidance, the 2006-1 document.
Okay.
Because that document says 6 months for relabeling unless you can justify differently.
Yeah, true.
And what I've seen on the BSI transfer form is that they say, okay, do you want to change your labeling in 6 months, 12 months, or 24 months? And this is a bit weird, because that means that apparently BSI Netherlands and BSI UK are allowed to offer a transfer process that's twice as long as in the NBOC guidance, or even 4 times as long as in the NBOC guidance, apparently with the Brexit as justification. But nobody says that aloud.
Okay.
And what I've also heard is that there are other notified bodies that would also like to scoop up BSI UK customers, which are not allowed by their competent authority to offer similar terms.
Okay.
You get this weird situation that there's I would say there's almost an unfair competition issue between notified bodies, because the member states can't agree on what would be a normal or what would be a justified labeling change period.
So mainly it's authorizing, for example, here we talk about 6 months, but maybe more, authorizing to get the label with the old notified body number, so BSI number from UK, and waiting 12 months. I mean, the transition period is 12 months to then change to the new notified body. Is it that?
That's right, yeah.
So yeah, 6 months is really short. So yeah, now they increase it because maybe people have stock, if I can say, with those products, and they cannot change this stock or reproduce those products. So it's mainly the reason, I suppose.
Yeah, well, that's you could say that's one of the problems. Also, because the Brexit is depending on what's going to happen either next month or further away. But yeah, I mean, I can see why the Brexit would be a situation in which you would justify a longer changeover period. But then I would say make a European standard for that, and then allow all notified bodies to do that.
Yeah, no, it's clear. It's as you say, it's really unfair for people. Just one thing. So do you have customers that start to contact you to ask you advices of what should they do now if they didn't start, or?
Yes, and that leads to sometimes discussions that are straight out of Alice in Wonderland.
Okay.
Because then I ask them, okay, so why haven't you been doing anything so far? And then they say, well, for whatever reasons, the budget wasn't there, our management didn't believe this was happening, and all that stuff. But I think the most problematic there's 2 things you should be doing stuff for at the moment. You should have a scenario for a hard Brexit, and you should have a scenario for a soft Brexit, whatever it's going to be, first of all. If you don't have scenarios for that, I think you're probably not running your company correctly, or you have a very weird perception of risk management.
Okay.
And there's the whole thing with transition to the MDR. Yeah. And I think if you're starting only now with your MDR transition, and even if you're only starting now with your IVDR transition, because that's 2 years further out for the date of application, all the time you give away basically is time you give away, and time that is going to come back and basically make things difficult on you. For example, because you need access to experts that are not there anymore.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I mean, if if I speak to consultants now that say, yeah, I've got my first MDR project, then I'm like, at this moment, I'm like, well, okay, then probably you're not the first one that people are going to call. But yeah, then as a company, you're forced to work with people that are not the best. So that's one. Also, technically speaking, there's the possibility to if you currently have a CE certificate, to renew the CE certificate, so you can profit from the so-called soft transition period. So theoretically, you could renew your MDD or AMDD, AIMDD certificate until theoretically 2024.
Yeah.
But if you want to do that, then you need to look at your notified body's timing for that. And if you're with BSI, for example, BSI has said, if you do not hand in an MDD or AIMDD recertification request that is completely signed, sealed, and delivered and fully justified and reasoned by end of Q1 this year, so that's in 1 month and March, then I cannot guarantee that I can deliver this recertification before May 2020, because, you know, we also have this MDR coming and we have all this stuff to do under the MDR. And you see other notified bodies. I haven't seen any notified body yet that publicly said that they have the same timeline, but I know of others that have also timelines for this. If you look at TÜV Süd, for example, they didn't say end of Q1, but they said they were a lot later in 2019, but still, they also have timelines. So that means that if you miss the window for MDD recertification and you are not ready to do an MDR certification for whatever reason, for example, because your notified body is accredited too late, you don't have a slot, whatever, then you miss out on both opportunities. And then the end of May 2020 date is really it's basically a drop dead date for you, because then you don't have an MDD certificate anymore. You don't have a MDR certificate, so you're basically out of luck and illegal.
Do you think there will be some kind of products that will not be supplied to the market anymore due to that?
Yes, I think there will be companies that get this wrong, and those products will not be available to the market. But what I see more in terms of products not being available to the market, and that's something that my hospital clients are complaining about, is that because the MDR is such a lot of work and you don't really have a meaningful transitional period, you see manufacturers engage in portfolio rationalization. So they look at their portfolio and they're saying, okay, which devices do I want to invest in for remediation to the MDR and which ones I don't want to invest in? And that is going to be that is creating situations for hospitals that are not always comfortable. And depending, of course, on how the whole notified body bottleneck at the end is going to play out, may create more shortages, because it might be that even if you're in a situation where you are ready for a conformity assessment application under the MDR, it might be that your notified body is not designated, or your notified body is just not ready in time.
Yeah, because even if the notified body put an application for it, maybe they will not be designated. So you are waiting for him to receive his accreditation, but at the end, if he doesn't receive it, then you need to have a plan B or plan C, or I don't know how many plans you need to plan.
Yeah, you need to think in scenarios. And what I see a lot with companies is that they haven't looked at what are the chances that my notified body will actually be designated, and if they're not designated, what am I going to do?
Yeah,
you see a lot of, I think, frankly, pretty misleading communication by notified bodies that are just saying like, yeah, well, all will be well, and I remember how this whole thing went with the team and B notified bodies. Remember that situation?
Yeah.
Just before 26 November 2017, they said everybody of us, every single member of us is going to apply immediately on 26 November 2017. The Turkish notified bodies could not even apply because the Turkish state didn't have legislation in place for that. The Swiss notified bodies were completely unclear because the Swiss had their MRA under negotiation, all of that, but still. And then there were quite a number that were in all kinds of trouble that didn't have their applications ready. Still, they say, yeah, we are all going to apply. That was pretty misleading, I thought. And then you see the first commission figures come out and you're like, hey, this is not possible. There are a lot less applications than Team MB members said that they were going to apply. This is weird.
Yeah.
And if you ask, and then you see clients ask me like, hey, what's happening? And you see their communication with the notified body, and the notified body says, no, all under control. And if you ask them directly, yeah, but did you put in an application? They say, well, we're not allowed to say, which is also not entirely right. I mean, notified bodies like, I think, BSI and TÜV were always quite transparent about what they're doing. And I think that's a good standard. But there are a lot of notified bodies that are also, they're unapproachable. And if you ask them questions about what is your plan, what are you doing, they just ignore the question.
So it's really, I would say, actually, as we talked about Brexit, now we talk about the EU MDR transition. It looks like a chaotic situation at the moment for medical device manufacturers. They have many messages coming. They don't maybe listen to all of them or don't really understand them. And now maybe at the end, it's the consumer who will be impacted and will not receive the products that he needs. So it's a difficult situation, I think, for the industry, actually.
Well, and also for patients that would not receive medical devices. I mean, it remains possible for member states to grant exceptions on a national level. But then these are things that have to be taken care of at the national level. So then you get this whole patchwork of this country does this for emergency measure, this country does that. So it'll become, confusion everywhere, which is an acronym for CE that we probably do not want to be in, right?
I didn't know this one, but it's good. Yeah, so CE, confusion everywhere. Great.
But confusion everywhere.
Yeah. Okay, so if the people have no plan, I think they need to have a plan quickly, or maybe it's too late. But I think, you have really to think about your notified bodies and ask them really what they are doing. Is there anything? I mean, do they really think that they will have this accreditation? I don't know. Is there a due date for getting the accreditation, or it's like, it can be until the last moment?
No, because I mean there is the MDR and the IVDR do list a timeline for the accreditation process, but in the accreditation process, there's of course the time it takes for a notified body to resolve the non-conformities that stand in the way of designation. And that is something that does not have a fixed time period attached to it. So these are typically things that you can't predict. If you find a lot of major non-conformities in a notified body that they can't easily fix, then let's say, for example, I don't know, there are rules about notified bodies' impartiality. Mm-hmm. And if you have a notified body that forms part of a bigger corporate group or was just acquired by a bigger corporate group, then it might be difficult to resolve things like this.
Okay.
And to agree to, okay, so what kind of corporate structure do we need that the joint assessment team is satisfied that the notified body is enough at arm's length in this corporate group?
So you can imagine, it's also difficult for the competent authority because they have to check all those requirements. And if they have some of the notified bodies that don't fulfill those requirements, it can be a longer time maybe to put in place a strategy for notified body to be accredited then, and then to answer to his customers who are all waiting, if I can say. I think there are a lot of people waiting now and say, I want to be accredited, I want to be certified, so please be accredited as soon as possible.
Yeah, and there's a lot you can say there too, because I was speaking to the guys of the commission at some point, and they said very deadpan, well, we've got our process set up, but actually we have a lot less applications for designation than we expected.
Okay.
Which I think also true, because there were quite some notified bodies that when they started filling in their application packages, that they realized that there was more to it than they initially thought. And then another thing, like I said, the whole notified body surveillance system at member states is quite thinly staffed. And these joint assessment teams that look at the notified bodies for the MDR and the IVDR designation, they are composed of people that are partially delegated by the Commission, partially by member states. Some people from the member state that received the application, and some from another member state. Not every member state has people can just pony up people and say, yeah, we will just dedicate them to this European process. I mean, if you're Malta and you have two people that are working on medical devices surveillance in the first place, you are not going to give your whole national surveillance capacity to Brussels and say, yeah, do some good stuff with that. That's not possible. Yeah, so you also see that staffing the joint assessment teams was quite an issue, which I heard also led to some interesting situations with people being on joint assessment teams that were not always, that you had divergent opinions in a joint assessment team that people were discussing in the corridors where the notified body could hear it. And I mean, there were some weird situations going on there as well.
Great. So I think it's not the end. We have until May 2020 to see first if everything starts to go on the right direction. And I think we have until 2024 or even 2025 to look at this process and see really if it worked really well. Because as we said, first there is the transition period for class 1 products and other new non-medical products which have to be by May 2020. And then all the others that have an MDD certificate can go until 2024. So it's like there will be some kind of anecdotes or story to talk about. And I hope you can come back and tell us more about that maybe in a future episode also.
Well, I can tell you some right now. I mean, for software, for example, Rule 11 that bumps up a lot of the clinical decision support software to class 2A or higher. I mean, there's still quite actually big, sophisticated software companies finding out only now about holy shit, this is actually going to affect us, and we need our software CE certified by May 2020, and that's a big thing, because you see that the software is not let's say an overly represented expertise at notified bodies, because they never needed it, because software was always Rule 12 self-certified. So they never had a lot of software experts, and now they need a lot of software experts, which are difficult to find. So that's going to be a big bottleneck, I think.
No, it's true. I also have a lot of questions about this Rule 11. So what means can provide death or can provide injuries? If I say something but the doctor misinterprets it and then it's the death of the patient, is it my fault? Is the fault of the? I mean, it's like a lot of questions also about that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions there still, and there's guidance in the making, and I know that it's even explicit in the CAMD roadmap document that they're going to come with guidance on that, but that's going to be available this summer, I think. Let me look in my secret notes. Yeah, it's mid 2019, and I know there's a lot of work is being done on it at the moment, and they're pretty far along with it. But yeah, I mean that's going to be a very determinative moment for the software medical software industry. This guidance coming out.
So yeah, so let's see what they will say. I'm sure there will be a lot of comments about that. Okay, Erik, let's wrap up this episode. Just wanted to ask you where people can follow you, I think, on your blog. So can we have again the name of the blog? I will just put everything on the show notes, but what was again the URL address?
Yeah, the URL of the blog is medicaldeviceslegal.com. And otherwise, people can also that's the URL for the blog. People can find me on my on the website of my firm, which is Axon Lawyer, so AXON lawyers.com, and all my details are on it, even my mobile number. So
they can disturb you at 2 a.m. if they have questions about
my phone at night.
Okay, so I will put anyway everything on the show notes. So Erik, thank you for this episode. I think there was a lot of details, information. For sure, in maybe a few months, I will try to invite you again to give us maybe more details about what is coming, and if people are starting to knock at your door asking you for more solutions for their problems. But yeah, I really hope that the medical device industry is now waking up, if I can say. They are now looking at plan A, plan B, or all the strategies that they have to put in place for Brexit, for the MDR, for IVDR, as you said. IVDR is not in 2020, but 2022, but they have to start now to think about it. So it's something that is really, really important for, as you say, so it's or you swim or you sink. So you have to decide, and for that, you have to put in place a strategy.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I saw the best way to look at it as a company is just look at, okay, what's my turnover in the European market and the markets that are dependent on the CE mark. And if I don't get this done, then this is what I'll lose. And also companies also sometimes say like, yeah, but we will bridge with stock and so on, or we will take some time to get back to the market. But don't forget that there's other companies that see this as a tool of competition. So Exactly. They will immediately scoop up your market share, and then you have to fight your way back into the market. And that's actually not that easy.
Yeah, I imagine, people will not wait for them to come back to the market. They will choose another competitor and they will go with it and learn to use their products. And after that, they will not come back to another product again. So yeah, I can.
Dependent on tenders, for example, public tenders. Well, I mean, you might exclude yourself from the market for 5 years that way.
So yeah. Okay, so thank you, Erik. I wish you a really nice day, and thank you really for coming to the podcast.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Hey, it was a great talk with Erik Vollebregt. So, if you need a lawyer specialized on medical devices or pharmaceutical, Erik is really the right one. So don't forget to go on the website of Axon Lawyer. I will put the links on the show notes. And don't forget to say to him that you come on my behalf. So, thank you very much. And so don't forget to keep learning. Share this episode, share this podcast with your colleagues who wants to learn medical devices, regulation and standards. And I'll see you on the next episode. So thank you very much and have a nice day.